It's Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Another plane crash, this time in Canada. Never before seen numbers at the southern border, and when your opponents take their masks off, pay attention. Next on the AM Update.
This airplane just crashed 2-3. Mike, take them out of back. You can just stay there.
This is going to yet again raise the concern about FAA staffing.
The borders. I care about the border. So let DOJ do what they do. I care about removing public safety threats from the country.
DOGE causing a reign of terror, chaos across the federal government.
After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore.
It's got nothing to do with elections.
Filling in for Megyn Kelly this morning, I'm Aaron McIntyre, and here's what's happening. At least 18 people were injured after a plane crash at Canada's Toronto Pearson International Airport, according to Delta Airlines. Though the flight with 80 people on board from Minneapolis ended upside down on the runway, no one was killed in the incident. Strong winds may have been impacting Toronto all day. Winds at the time of the crash were sustained at 32 miles per hour with gusts of 40. The incident comes less than 3 weeks after an American Airlines plane collided midair with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter while on approach to Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport. Air traffic control captured the moments before and during the incident.
Tower, Endeavor 4819, I'm sorry. That was 23. Endeavor 4819, Toronto Tower, wind 270, 23, gust 33, clear to land on 823. You might get a slight bump in the glide path. There'll be an aircraft in front of it. Clear to land, 23, Endeavor 4819. We're 7105, pull up, go around. The go around, 7105. This airplane just crashed at 23. We're 7105, pull up, go around. Mike, take them out of back, you can just stay there.
Never ceases to amaze me how calm and collective air traffic control remains during incidents like this. Just some crazy footage emerged of this. The fuselage of this aircraft, just by itself, wings detached, upside down on a frigid-looking runway. Apologies for the bleeped out, admittedly, audio here, but this is just some of the sounds from the passengers who survived miraculously this crash.
Everything, drop it. Come on. Don't take your
The individual now steps out of the airplane, one of 80 passengers.
Holy oh my fucking
Just an incredible sight. Like I said, the fuselage of that aircraft with the wings ripped off, just standing there upside down on the runway. Well, this jabroni from NBC News wasted zero time blaming the American President Donald Trump for the aviation incident that happened in Canada.
I did want to, underscore, to pick up on the conversation you were just having, though, in terms of the recent string of aviation incidents, Tom. This is going to yet again raise the concern about FAA staffing, air traffic control staffing. Now, this is a Canadian air traffic control tower, and this is under Canadian authority once it crosses the border. And yet, as you know, there has been this talk about maybe staff cuts at the FAA as a part of President Trump's effort to trim down the federal workforce. And yet, as you also know, the FAA has been complaining for years that they are...
That's real. Tom Costello, senior correspondent for NBC News. That squeaking sound you hear in the background? That's the sound of Tom Costello. Legend has it he is still twisting himself into rhetorical pretzels, trying to blame a disaster, or an accident, I should say, that happened in Canada on the American president. Just incredible. In other news, Tom Homan, border czar, posted this on social media yesterday, quote, "In the last 24 hours, the U.S. Border Patrol has encountered a total of 229 aliens across the entire southwest border. That's down from a high of over 11,000 a day under Biden. I started as a Border Patrol agent in 1984, and I don't remember the numbers ever being that low. President Trump promised a secure border, and he is delivering." That's Tom Homan, border czar, writing on social media Monday morning. That is pretty incredible. He started, as he said, as a Border Patrol agent in 1984, and now, over 30 years later, 40 years later, he can't remember a time when border apprehensions along the southwest border have been as low as they are. He appeared on CNN recently to discuss the help or lack thereof he's received at Immigration and Customs Enforcement from the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. Here's Dana Bash.
What is your promise, sir?
My promise is I'm not going to ask those officers to be immigration officers. I'm not going to push them to enforce immigration law. I told them I want to arrest the bad guy. I want to arrest the public safety threats. I want to get Rikers Island so we can get the public safety threat before they're released to the street. I want his help, especially the NYPD intelligence unit, who's the finest intelligence apparatus in the world, to help me find missing children. There are probably many are in forced labor, many are going to be in forced sex trafficking. Not all of them, but many of them. And that's a promise I made to him. Do you do law enforcement stuff? Help me get the public safety threats and the children. I'm never going to ask you to arrest an illegal alien, and that is my promise. Not to make them immigration officers, but make them cops working with cops.
So if he doesn't do the things that you want him to do, would you be okay with DOJ reopening its investigation into him? Should they do that?
That's out of my lane. I'm a border czar. I care about the border. So let DOJ do what they do. I care about removing public safety threats from the country, as President Trump's promised the American people.
Is that CNN's Dana Bash trying to trap border czar Tom Homan into a war of words and a he said, she said with Mayor Eric Adams in New York, and Tom Homan isn't taking the bait. This is just the latest example in the young second Trump administration of something that's been incredibly encouraging to me. It seems like, maybe you can tell me at Real AM Update on X or Instagram, it seems to me that with near ubiquity, the Trump administration, all of their appointments, all of their designations like border czar Tom Homan, they have been extremely adept in handling the media. And I think it's because this time around, everybody on that team knows what they're getting into, and they are treating the media with the contempt that they so rightly deserve and have earned. So again, another tip of the cap to border czar Tom Homan. Moving on to DOGE news, Elon Musk indicated in a post on X that millions of people listed in a social security database are recorded as centenarians, with the death field set to false, meaning they're over 100 years old and they're still alive. Musk posted, quote, according to the Social Security database, these are the numbers of people in each age bucket with the death field set to false. Maybe Twilight is real and there are a lot of vampires collecting Social Security, Musk said. His post featured a chart indicating there are more than 20 million listed with ages 100 and higher, including more than 3.9 million people in the 130 to 139-year-old range, more than 3.5 million in the 140 to 149-year-old range, and more than 1.3 million people in the 150 to 159-year-old range. Now, if there were just a few in like one single bucket, that would just say, hey, there's some sort of coding error here. But there's millions of people who say that they are still alive over the age of 120 years old. There are no good explanations for that. And then there's this. DOGE has also discovered an identification code linking U.S. Treasury payments to a budget line item, which accounts for nearly $4.7 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars in payments, which was oftentimes left blank. DOGE wrote in a post on X, quote, the Treasury Access Symbol, or TAS, is an identification code linking a Treasury payment to a budget line item, standard financial process. In the federal government, the TAS field was optional for around $4.7 trillion in payments and was often left blank, making traceability almost impossible. As of Saturday, this field is now required, increasing insight to where that money is actually going. So just two items in the past few days that DOGE has uncovered. Just rampant, at least for the very least, rampantly ripe for waste, fraud, and abuse, which for my entire adult lifetime has just been a talking point for Republicans running for elected office. It seems finally like action is being taken. Regardless, Democrat Congressman Eugene Vindman told CNN,
we've already seen that this DOGE, I call it the Department of Government Inefficiencies, is causing a reign of terror, chaos across the federal government. Just this week, they released classified information about a U.S. intelligence agency. They have access to the American people's personal information, bank accounts and things like that they're frankly not entitled to. And so I have a major concern about them going into Department of Defense and futzing around with, the internal systems there in U.S. national security.
That is Congressman Eugene Vindman, a Democrat. Let's listen to what he said at the very beginning of that clip one more time.
We've already seen that this DOGE, I call it the Department of Government Inefficiencies, is causing a reign of terror, chaos across the federal government. just this week.
What? A reign of terror and chaos across the federal government? If you're familiar with the character Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, pretty sure after hearing that, a reign of terror across the federal government, he's, let's just say, very excited. When we come back, Vice President J.D. Vance shows off his millennial bona fides in a put-down of epic proportions. Florida has a new attorney general. We'll hear from him. And an exciting development in right-wing media. It's coming up next. There has been some attempted hubbub over the Trump administration's decision to limit Associated Press reporters' access to the White House, for the Associated Press refusing to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of America. Now, I have very little sympathy for the Associated Press here. After all, their style guide is the one that forces the language of the regime down our throats each and every day. If it's not the English department at universities, it's definitely the Associated Press that really catapults the new language, the new speak into our ecosystem in this country each and every day. Words like, or terms like, homosexual marriage, terms like transgender women, terms like, what did I see yesterday? Nate Hochman at America 2100 pointed out it was the AP Style Guide, the AP Style book that spelled out why every journalist in America should use uppercase B when writing black, when talking about black people, but should not use an uppercase W when describing white people. That is the AP. So I have very little sympathy for them on this issue for refusing to call the Gulf of America the Gulf of America. And I really don't care what their justification for it is. Well, Mehdi Hasan, he is a British-American journalist. He tagged Vice President J.D. Vance, trying to put him on blast, saying, "Hey, J.D. Vance, I know you're busy lecturing the Europeans on free speech," alluding to J.D. Vance's comments at the Munich Security Conference, "but have you seen this story about the Associated Press being denied access to the White House?" J.D. Vance, proving his millennial bona fides in a put-down of epic proportions, responded to Mehdi Hasan's pearl-clutching by saying, quote, "Yes, dummy, I have heard of this story. I think there's a difference between not giving a reporter a seat in the White House press briefing room and jailing people for dissenting views. The latter is a threat to free speech. The former is not. Hope that helps." The dude is on fire. Like I said yesterday, his career arc is on pace to be the anti-Obama. Mark my words. The state of Florida has a new attorney general. His name is James Uthmeier. He served as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' chief of staff before being elevated into the position of attorney general, left vacant by Ashley Moody, who took Marco Rubio's seat in the Senate after Rubio moved on to become Secretary of State. He was sworn in yesterday as Florida's new attorney general. Here are some of his comments at the ceremony.
No empty rhetoric, no posturing, no excuses. We will use the office of the Attorney General to punish criminals, to protect the innocent, and to stand boldly by our brave law enforcement. We will champion an America First agenda, and we will fight back against the cartels, the gangs, and the traffickers that have wreaked havoc on our country for far too long. We will not stand idly by as the left tries to infiltrate our institutions and use the court system to indoctrinate our kids.
That is James Uthmeier, new Attorney General for the state of Florida. From what I have read and heard about James, the dude is a bulldog, and you don't want to get on his bad side from what I've heard. I think he'll be an excellent pick for the state of Florida as their new Attorney General and maybe a higher office someday down the road. Now here's this from the New York Post. Megyn Kelly said Monday she will host a second podcast. SiriusXM host said the new podcast aims to, quote, slice through the leftist propaganda that dominates news coverage of the Trump administration. Available every weekday at 6 a.m. starting tomorrow, the podcast will provide a morning summary of the day's headlines, providing a fair and factual product, standing out in a sea of other podcasts that are leftist propaganda disguised as news. She's naming it the AM Update. What the... Megyn, seriously? Okay, I like you. Why you gotta go and do this? Why you got to go and do this? No, I'm kidding. So here's the deal. I was pretty shocked to see this yesterday. It's not how I thought my Monday was going to be going. I didn't think I was going to be having conversations with attorneys yesterday afternoon, but I did have a conversation with an attorney. And this podcast is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. And now here's this. Told you yesterday about J.D. Vance's comments at the Munich Security Conference last Friday. And they were really quite exhilarating. It was quite exhilarating in the year 2025 to hear somebody articulate really a true American first vision to our supposed betters, or at worst peers, over in Germany and the rest of Europe. Talking down to them as a boss would talk to employees. That was wonderful to hear. Well, they didn't like that. Surprise, surprise. The chairman of the Munich Security Council got up after J.D. Vance's speech later on in the weekend and literally broke down in tears.
After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Yeah, he's crying. He's crying. If you wonder what that giant sucking sound is in the background, he actually started crying and then walked off stage. Okay. If you're wondering what that giant sucking sound is, it is the T level of every male in this audience dropping to subterranean levels after listening to that. So anyway, that's the chairman of the Munich Security Council. After J.D. Vance said, y'all are becoming the very thing, y'all are becoming the villains. You're becoming the very thing you said you're up against, you said you're opposed to, and that's what you're becoming. You're becoming a dystopia where you're putting people in prison, UK, for silent prayer across the street from a baby killing facility. You're becoming the baddies. And so the chairman of this conference gets up, said our common values are not so common after all. Here, watch me cry and storm off the stage. Well, then there's this. CBS News' 60 Minutes. In the aftermath of all that, J.D. Vance said, you guys are getting draconian over here. Okay, you better come correct. The dude cries, and then 60 Minutes on Sunday night has this story.
It's 6:01 on a Tuesday morning, and we were with state police as they raided this apartment in northwest Germany.
Hier ist die Polizei, wir müssen bitte mal mit Ihnen reden.
Inside, 6 armed officers searched a suspect's home, then seized his laptop and cell phone. Prosecutors say those electronics may have been used to commit a crime. The crime, posting a racist cartoon online. At the exact same time across Germany, more than 50 similar raids played out. Part of what prosecutors say is a coordinated effort to curb online hate speech in Germany.
I just don't know what to say anymore. You could not purchase, there is not enough money. There's not enough gold in Fort Knox. Well, maybe that's a bad example. There is not enough money on this planet to purchase the levels of, let's call it serendipity, to have these events play out the way that they did over the weekend. J.D. Vance tells Europe, y'all are the baddies. Y'all are the 1984 dystopia you said you were fighting against. Come correct. Listen to your people. And of course, all of the European Union leaders got their panties in a bunch, started crying. And then 60 Minutes on Sunday evening. Hey, come along with us on a hate speech raid in Germany. A pre-dawn raid with a bunch of armed goons. Because some rando German posted a racist meme. These three things happening in a matter of about 72 hours over the weekend. Again, on some level, don't you just have to start admitting the Trump White House just kind of tiptoes through the raindrops. You could not pay or even imagine better timing than that. When we come back, when your opponents tell you who they are, who they really are, pay attention. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. When your opponents, your enemies, have mask-off moments, you better pay attention. Let's go back last week. This is CNN and Scott Jennings. He's their token conservative contributor on that network. He had a back and forth about whether or not the President of the United States has the statutory authority to actually hire and fire the people that he wants to hire and fire. He had a back and forth with this panel. Listen to this, particularly the voice at the very end.
I think is a joke. That you have these partisan hack Democrat attorney generals, they get together, and the only thing they know how to do is try to nullify the results of the last election by venue shopping these district court judges. They find the most lunatic liberals they can. They file lawsuits knowing full well they're going to try to usurp the president's authority, tie this up in court for years.
That stuff is sacrosanct. And you've got people going in there who don't know anything about that system.
But these are also just restraining orders.
Doing this.
They're
he knows
asking
nothing about it.
What you just said is so profound. You said these people don't know anything and they don't know what they're doing.
That's right.
But they're appointees.
But Elon Musk.
I understand. But they are appointees of the duly elected president. So your view, you're here as our legal expert, but your view is because you don't personally believe they know enough that the duly elected president, who appointed a Treasury Secretary and who appoints special appointees like Elon Musk, shouldn't be able to act as the president because you don't personally believe they know enough?
Well, they
is that how it works?
No.
Or do elections mean anything to you?
Well, it's got nothing to do with elections.
Oh, well, there's a little bit of a mask-off moment there. That voice that you just heard there, that's Nick Ackerman, former prosecutor, had something to do with Watergate. Now he's on CNN. And it's a career path that he chose. Talking about whether Donald Trump has the statutory authority to hire and fire the administration that he wants, the duly elected president of the United States that was certified by Congress. And he says it has nothing to do with elections. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I think we already suspected that, but thank you for telegraphing that. Thank you for telegraphing that for us. Now we go on to what happened on Sunday. Here is Margaret Brennan. Yes, the Margaret Brennan of the I don't really care Margaret, questioning Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the aforementioned comments from J.D. Vance about free speech in Europe.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history.
That's a great response from Marco Rubio, by the way. So there's just two examples in the last handful of days from mainstream media mouthpieces for the old regime with total and complete mask-off moments. What's particularly amusing about the Margaret Brennan clip is there's nothing that she nor CBS can say along the lines of, well, what I was really trying to say was ... Well, I misspoke. What I really meant to say was ... No, what you communicated was, if you champion free speech, you're a Nazi. You're a Nazi. That's what you communicated. I mean, that is just retardation of the highest order mixed into a cocktail of 200 proof contempt. So two mask-off moments from different mouthpieces of the old regime and mainstream media. Got that Nick Ackerman saying that whether or not Donald Trump can hire and fire his own employees has got nothing to do with the elections. What does it have to do with then, Mr. Ackerman? And you have, I don't really care, Margaret, saying you're a Nazi if you believe in free speech. When your opponents tell you who they truly are, pay attention. Because they're never going to have a moment of self-awareness. They're never going to have a moment of introspection. Are we the baddies here? That's never going to happen. Why do we need to pay attention when they take their mask off? Because I think it'll help us underscore and motivate us to do what needs to be done to ensure that these people never see real power again. And that means to hold them accountable. Margaret Brennan should have been fired. This Nick Ackerman guy should never be allowed to see the light of day in polite society again. He should be too embarrassed, what I'm trying to say. He should be too embarrassed to show his face in public after spewing the filth that he spewed, that you just heard a few moments ago. Until that happens, these people are just going to feel more and more emboldened and empowered to do and say whatever the hell they want to say. And be assured what they want to do and say is hell. That'll do it for a Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update, the original AM Update.